So today in the lab we're working again on the Apple IIgs. Last time we got the battery out and did a short introduction to the system. Next thing I need to do is to get some kind of operating system that I can actually boot this thing on. And I could make floppy disks, right? And there's a variety of ways to make floppy disks for the Apple IIgs. But the IIgs has a unique feature that I want to leverage instead. And in fact, I don't even need floppy disks to use this machine. So how do we do that? So this is a LocalTalk adapter. Really innovative feature on early 80s to late 90s Macs, and also on the IIgs. This connects to the RS422 serial port that's present on the IIgs and beige Macintoshes, and allows you to create a small network. So speeds are kind of low, maximum distance is kind of low, but it's a very cheap way to network together a bunch of Macs, and in fact an Apple IIgs. So the way these work is this end goes to the IIgs or the Macintosh, and each computer is going to have one of these connectors. And then they are daisy chained together using these two connectors on the top. So in setup it looks something like this. You have one of these connectors going to each of the computers, and then a cable on either side, either both or just one, that goes to the next machine on the chain. And so on and so forth. So we would just connect this right up to the printer port on the IIgs, and then do the same on the Macintoshes. And one of the reasons why we plug it in the printer port is because one of the early use cases for this technology was for networked printers. So you have a bunch of Macs in an office or a bunch of Apple IIgs, and they could all share a printer all through LocalTalk. So now that I've got my IIgs with a LocalTalk adapter, I need something to connect it to. So I bought this. Now I gave away most of my Mac stuff sometime between 2000 and 2015, in bits and pieces. So I'm having to reacquire some stuff that I want. And so this is a recent purchase here. And there's an overarching goal with this, but first I got to get it running. So this PowerMac G3 is kind of an interesting machine. It's the last of the beige PowerMacs, right? After this model, you start to have iMacs and you start to have PowerMacs in different color schemes and different design patterns. So this was the last of this kind of mid-90s Apple design language. This was released around 1997. So it's about the same time frame as the Cyberstorm PPC that I have in my Amiga, but it's the next generation of PowerPC chip. So this is a PowerPC 700 series, whereas the one that I had in the Cyberstorm PPC is a 600 series. And Apple and Motorola and all those folks called the 700 series of PowerPC chips the G3. So it's a pretty powerful machine, and it has some very interesting features. It has PCI, you can put USB in it, you can get DVI output, but it also has legacy things. So like ADB and the Apple serial bus and a floppy drive. Macs after this model did not, by and large, have floppy drives. You had to use USB ones, which aren't compatible with every format. I'm under the impression, although I might be wrong, that the drive in here is a super drive, meaning that it can read basically every Mac format ever produced. So that lends this to some very interesting things in the retro world, like AppleTalk networking, LocalTalk networking, and reading old Mac disks, which are hard to read otherwise unless you have some setup like this. So this poor Mac has a lot of problems. And in a way, it's kind of a case study of why not to buy off eBay and why not to ship. So first thing you notice is this monitor doesn't have a stand, right? By the late 90s, pretty much every PC monitor, whether it was for a Mac or a Sun or regular old PC, had a stand attached so you can adjust it. Well, this thing did have a stand, but in shipping, it broke. And this was even with a seller that took reasonably good precautions, right? They had custom-made, form-fitting packaging and all that, but even still, in transit, it broke. And the sad part about this is that the stand is completely removable from the monitor base. So this might have been able to be saved had the seller removed the stand from the monitor and kind of packed it separately. Anyhow, oh well. So the next problem is the power button. Notice it flickers on for a second. This is a pretty common problem with monitors, I've found. And, you know, basically it requires a new switch. Shouldn't be too hard to fix, but it's going to require disassembling the monitor, which I don't really want to do right now. So instead, being very careful not to scratch the plastic, I can use a little shim, in this case a tiny screwdriver, to just use pressure to hold it on. Alright, let's boot this thing up. Now this is a pretty clear looking monitor, so that's good. This is worth repairing and saving. And this is where we have some real trouble. That's the hard drive. Apologies for the flicker here, but if we zoom in, we can see the question mark disk. So the drive in this is dead. So rather than deal with that monitor right now, and to prevent y'all from going blind from like the flicker on the screen, or deaf from the CRT whine that I can no longer hear, want to use a regular LCD panel. But how do I get it hooked up? Macs at this time used kind of a unique video cable. It's this right here. So not a standard VGA cable, but this Mac can output pretty standard resolutions that any VGA monitor can accept. And so the answer to that is a little adapter like this guy here. Now this may look kind of strange, and that's because Apple did something really innovative with their monitor cables. So if you look at this monitor cable right here, you notice not all the pins are in place. And the reason for that is those extra pins on the cable are used to give information to the Mac about what video resolutions this monitor supports. Now modern monitors do this by other means, so this is pretty primitive compared to what happens in modern monitors. But an adapter like this, which used to be pretty common, has dip switches on it. And so this tells the Mac what resolution to output and then sends it out to VGA. Apple's all about plug and play, right? So by having these pins tell the Mac what resolutions the monitor supports, you could plug in the monitor and the OS through these pins would know the optimal display resolution to present to the monitor. Adapters like this kind of fake it, but you can switch these dip switches around to get different output types from the Mac. And there's a table that you can find. These I think were pretty standard. I used to have a bunch of these. And I'll link a table that I found on the internet that describes all these in the description. So now that we have that all connected, we can see this much better. And we can zoom in real close here and very clearly see no disk. So the hard drive is dead. Fortunately, CD burners are still a thing, and this machine can boot from a CD. And the CD-ROM drive in this machine appears to be working pretty good. Now the Mac is smart enough to know that when I put in a CD to boot automatically, if you have a Mac that has a working hard drive and you want to boot off a CD-ROM drive instead, there's a key press that you can push at boot up time that will cause it to boot from CD. I think it's holding down the C key, but I can't quite remember. It's been a long time. So opening up this case is pretty straightforward. There are two pressure points on both sides of the case that you push up on, and then you should be able to pull back the top part of the case and lift it up. Now, the thing that I hate about these old Macs is that whenever you do this, it seems like all kinds of crap just falls out. So these pieces right here are RF shields that go over the faceplates here, and they're really obnoxious because they come out very easily like that, and they bend easily and they rust. Overall, like, really very frustrating stuff. So switching into handheld mode, one of the first things you notice when working on Macs of this era is that there is an awful lot of plastic. You know, compare and contrast this to the Amiga 4000. There's not a lot of plastic in the Amiga 4000. There's the faceplate and the power supply switch rod, and I think that's about it. Here there's all these plastic caseworks. And the idea at the time was to make this kind of toolless, but over time what this has actually meant is that these plastics chip and degrade over time. So this machine has been just vomiting out bits of plastic all over the place that have, with age, become brittle and have chipped off. And I don't even know if it's age. I used to have PowerMacs, I think an 8600 or an 8100 and a 6100. And they, even back in the day, were like that too. The plastic was very brittle, it would chip a lot. So it's very frustrating and hard to repair. So how do we get to the hard drive on this unit? Well, first things first, we got to flip out this guy. And then what's going to happen is this rotates around, flips over, so we can get at the innards. And to do that, first we got to take out this piece, or flip this up rather. This gives us access to the PCI cards and the personality card. And then we got to undo two locks here. So this lock is the first one, and then this one up here is the second one. And make sure your power adapter or your power cord is out, otherwise it will catch. And then you just flip it up. And there we go. There is Mr. Hard Drive. While we're in here, we can also see there's our 3 PCI slots. There's what Apple calls a personality card. Some RAM banks, including video RAM. And we can see over here the battery, the CPU, and various other connectors for IDE and other things. Floppy. I'm not seeing the SCSI connector that I was told was on here. Oh, there it is, all the way in the back. And that is definitely not a wide SCSI connector right there. Unfortunately, it's kind of obscured a bit by the pull on the IDE cables, but that's just a normal 50-pin SCSI adapter. So I could conceivably put in here a SCSI 2 SD card, but I feel like it's just as easy to put in an IDE card, and that's what I have available to me. So we'll do that. So rather than trying to put in a replacement hard drive or use SCSI 2 SD, I'm going to be using this Compact Flash to IDE adapter. Compact Flash is essentially the same thing as IDE. It uses the same protocol. So this is a natural fit here. I've been using this in my Amiga with pretty good luck, so I think it'll work out just fine here. The cable jobs on these machines are pretty tight and always have been. So doing a video of this, so if I ever need to put this back together, I can know how. Again, like I say, this cabling's real tight. So this IDE cable for this first drive went here behind the power adapter cable and then flat down, and is folded in a very particular way to reach the hard drive. I don't know if this is brilliant or if it's masochistic or sadistic. I'm not sure, but it is what it is. I'm gonna have to find a longer IDE cable to wrap all the way from there over to where I have the IDE to compact flash adapter put. So after removing the hard drive, which was on this nice little sled here, I think that I've got this wired up to where it'll close and be okay. IDE ribbon cable coming up here over the personality card to compact flash adapter, and then through a series of extension cables managed to route the power through okay. We'll see how this works. And for this machine we have a nice new compact flash card. Hopefully this will work out just fine. So I got my compact flash to IDE adapter in there and was able to install Mac OS 9 from a CD. And I got my resolution looking pretty good, although I can't seem to get the highest resolution. This Mac is supposed to be able to output 1280 by 1024, and the max that I can get it to is 1024 by 768. And I'm not sure if it's the adapter that I'm using or if maybe there's something else here. Don't know. Alright, so now that we got this kind of working, I think next step maybe is to take it all apart and clean it.